We did a segment a couple weeks back on the worldwide peace protests supporting an immediate ceasefire. There have been many hugely attended protests throughout the country and throughout the world in the past few weeks, but none like this past weekend. Saturday, November 4th, giant Free Palestine rally in Washington, D.C., but more rallies of note all around the world. So I'm just going to play some video here. This is in Washington, D.C. The Answer Coalition estimated 300,000 people marched on Washington. Even conservative estimates were six figures, well over 100,000 people. Here you can see the streets flooded. This next piece is the clip that kind of went viral on Twitter. This is the time lapse of the parade stepping off that the Answer Coalition released. So you could see the people just keep on coming. Just a massive day of action yesterday in Washington, D.C. A truly inspiring sight to see. Like I said, their estimate, 300,000, even conservative estimates, well over 100,000 people on the streets of Washington, by far the largest pro-Palestinian demonstration in American history. So congratulations to everybody who attended. I know we had a bunch of friends who went there. What an amazing day. And as we will see in just a few seconds, they were not alone. There were protests all around the world. Yeah, all around the world. Yeah, as you can see, they just keep coming here. That's a time lapse from a rooftop, catching the crowd all day from the step off until the last step off. This is in London. This is what the great Douglas Murray called a hate march, right? They refer to that. Oslo, Norway. This is Montreal from a rooftop here.
Yeah, Jimmy tweeted out a picture saying, look at all those anti-Semites.
Yeah, right, exactly. This one, this is Berlin. And this is despite the police cracking down on the protests. Look at that. As literally as far as the eye can see. So obviously inspiring to see that, you know, people are not being intimidated and they're not being silenced. They're getting out there and making their voices heard, and the needle does seem to be moving. This I threw in at the end, the smallest of them all, but I would say last but not least, but this is in Israel. So these are some peace protesters in Israel. So obviously not the kind of crowd we'd want to see, but I thought I would throw that in there as well. So
hey, as we'll see later, you know, they got to worry about getting a beat down from the IDF.
I know, that great bastion of Western democracy over there, liberal values in practice.
It's the Greek ideal.
Yes, the Greek ideal. The Greek ideal. Well, yeah, I mean, look, just an amazing day of action yesterday. Congratulations to everyone who went out. And if you know, are able to find a rally near you, it's really important that you go and that you make your face known. Like I said, it is starting to move the needle now. Obviously, Common Dreams reports amid public outcry over Gaza carnage, 13 senators call for, quote, cessation of hostilities. Now, we're going to get into this in a little while because we're doing a segment on Bernie Sanders later. But the semantic games that are being played here between cessation of hostilities, humanitarian pause, and ceasefire, you know, it really makes I feel like the humanitarian pause is the new affordable and accessible out of the Democratic Party, right?
It's a Jackie Mason routine. If you
exactly.
want to pause, if you want a ceasefire, you don't quite want a ceasefire, you don't quite want an end to hostilities, you call for a little bit of momentary breathing space. It's why don't you just call for a ceasefire? Like they have to be dragged kicking and screaming. They're going to. By next week, other people are going to join Dick Durbin because from what I can see, these protests are not going to stop. And those things do scare them.
They do. They do. Common Dreams reports as mass protests and polling, not just protests, but polling, demonstrate the wide gap between the United States government's support for Israel's massacre of civilians in Gaza and the public's views on the Israel-Hamas war, with thousands of Palestinian rights supporters demanding a ceasefire. 13 Democratic senators appeared to be swayed by the public pressure late Thursday when they called for a cessation of hostilities. Ed Markey, Tim Kaine, Mark Warner, Dick Durbin, Jeff Merkley, Tammy Duckworth, Peter Welch, Elizabeth Warren, Cory Booker, Chris Van Hollen, Tina Smith, Chris Murphy, and Jean Shaheen joining. Notably absent from that list, obviously, Bernie Sanders. Now, Bernie Sanders put out a video yesterday calling for a pause. So again, there's cessation of hostilities, there's a pause, and then there's a ceasefire. The only person who I know of who on record said they wanted a ceasefire was Dick Durbin, who was asked directly about that on CNN. But even he did not make those concerns known to the president. And so it's just incredible to see this outpouring of sentiment and see not just that sentiment reflected in the streets, but in the polls. 66% overall want a ceasefire. Overall. That's factoring in Democrats, Republicans, independents, and yet you have nobody in the Senate calling for a ceasefire, except Dick Durbin doing it very meekly when asked about it and not relaying that wish to Joe Biden himself. And then you have 13 of them saying, well, we want a pause in hostilities. I think what the difference
Profiles and courage.
I think the difference is that a ceasefire means basically we're going to end the violence until the status quo changes, until somebody steps out of line and starts it again. Whereas a pause means, okay, Israel pause the bombing for us to get food in there, for us to get some people out of there, for us to maybe free the hostages, get some of the foreign nationals out, and then go back to bombing them. So the humanitarian pause is really not the right demand at all. Even a ceasefire, unless it is an indefinite ceasefire, meaning a permanent until obviously something happens, which it always does, but a permanent status quo end to this just horrific bombardment of a civilian population. But obviously, I mean, everybody watching this surely by now can tell that the needle has moved quite a long ways, Well, and that's in large part thanks to everybody who's gotten out there.
And you can see the Zionists are getting increasingly desperate. I mean, from what I can see on social media, a lot of them have fallen silent. Like a lot of them, I believe, are starting to think about how this is going to look on their social media history one day. I feel like some of them are starting to think about what they're going to have to answer for.
Please clap.